You're listening to episode number 2 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Liz Weiss here, your host, a registered dietitian, cookbook author, food blogger, a mom of 2 grown boys. And on today's show, I'm going to be digging into pasta with a modern Italian twist and sharing some easy and nutritious recipes that I'm pretty sure you're going to want to make for your family. And I'm going to do that with my guest, Alex Caspero. Now, she's a registered dietitian. She's the voice behind the beautiful food blog, Delish Knowledge. And she's the author of the new cookbook, Fresh Italian Cooking for the New Generation. According to Alex, and I love this line from her book, she says, it's possible to have your noodle and eat it too. Because I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, oh, I can't eat pasta. Well, yes, you can. And I hear Alex laughing in the background. But before I invite her to officially join us on the show, I just have to thank our show sponsors, Bush's Beans. Now, whether you enjoy baked beans, black beans, or the cannellini beans that I am going to add to the recipe for pasta fagioli that Alex and I are going to tell you all about today. Beans are just so convenient. They're so versatile. The possibilities when it comes to mealtime are endless. So for recipe inspiration, head on over to bushbeans.com. And I'd also like to thank my friends over at superhealthykids.com. They have so many family recipes on their blog, so many mealtime tips. I love them so much. So check them out, superhealthykids.com. So, when I was planning today's show, I was going through Alex's book. I added so many sticky notes, and I ended up actually making 2 recipes, roasted vegetable ziti. I'm going to make more, but I've done this one so far. Roasted vegetable ziti and this pasta fagioli. And Alex and I are going to tell you a little bit more about those recipes, but I don't want to keep Alex standing by any longer. So Alex, welcome to Liz's Healthy Table.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks so much for having me.
I could hear you in the background. I'm like, she's chomping
I know,
at the
I'm
bit
sorry.
here. She's chomping at the bit. I've got Alex with me via Skype, and you're based out of St. Louis, right?
I'm in St. Louis. Yep. I'm kind of all over, but we've been in St. Louis for the last year, so enjoying the Midwest scene.
I always think of St. Louis as the South because I'm from New England, and anything south of, New York City, it's kind of the South. Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, I don't.
That's kind of how my brain works. So, Alex, you had this book, which you sent me a few months ago, and I've had it in my podcast pile. And I finally took it out for like the 10th time, went through it, and I said, okay, I've got to have Alex on the show. So tell everybody a little bit about your book, which, by the way, we're giving a copy away.
Yes.
Head on over to lizshealthytable.com, and on the blog where I'm going to share this pasta fagioli recipe, I'll have information on how you can enter the giveaway. And then in the show notes as well, I'll also give a link to that blog post. So anyway, tell everybody a little bit about Fresh Italian Cooking for the New Generation. This is your first book, so tell us all about it.
Yeah, sure. So, I really wrote this book for a few reasons. And one you kind of touched on in the introduction is I think that so many people think of pasta as unhealthy. And I really wanted to break that notion. I'm from a very Italian family, and we ate pasta all the time growing up. So unhealthy in pasta really wasn't anything I understood as being sort of the common thought until I got away from my house and into college. And I wanted to show that. And I also wanted to share these recipes. Most of them are kind of my lightened up, healthier take. Again, those traditional recipes. And I wanted to show what I think meatless meals or plant-based eating or, really whatever kind of lexicon you want to use looks like. I don't use any kind of fake or mock meats in here. It's really based on beans and legumes and pasta and other grains and vegetables and, all those sort of things that I think we're all really familiar with and doing it in a creative and inspired way.
So for you, modern Italian cooking is, in a sense, very plant-based. So I know you're personally a vegetarian. I know the recipes in the book are vegetarian. So for you, is that what you mean, in a sense, by modern, just going more in that plant-based direction? It's a huge trend. I hear it from my readers all the time. They want more vegetarian recipes.
Yeah, I see that too. And I've been a vegetarian for about 15 years. And even back then, it wasn't as common. It was sort of an unknown thing. But now I think people are really embracing the idea that whether you're a vegetarian, one day a week or one meal a week or, full time, even a few times, I think we're all starting to see there's more benefits, so many ways in kind of cutting out the meat. And for me, it's not just about introducing recipes that don't necessarily have meat. It's how do we make them just as enjoyable and just as sort of traditional, even though they've kind of taken that lighter take. And I think that's really what I mean when I say modern. To me, the quote unquote new generation is someone who's interested in plant-based cooking and likes, sort of that traditional Italian fare, but wants it kind of in a healthier way. They can eat it on a more consistent basis.
Give me an example of a recipe in the book that people would normally think of meat, but you've turned it into sort of this modern twist with more of that vegetarian kind of a focus.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of my favorite recipes is my wild mushroom lasagna. It's definitely a weekend sort of cooking meal. It's lasagna. And I think that for most people, lasagna tends to come up images of, really kind of heavy bolognese or meat-based sauce. And this one, I think, is just as hearty, just as satiating, just as delicious, but we're swapping in wild mushrooms, which have that really great kind of umami taste to them that are kind of similar to meat, but of course done in a plant-based way. So that's probably a really good example of a traditional food that's kind of taken that little bit of spin, that little twist on it.
It's so funny. I'm totally going to digress here, but the other day I was on Facebook and I saw that Serena Ball, she's with a blog called Teaspoon of Spice. She had posted a photo of her, I think it was her son, who was foraging for mushrooms and he has found morel mushrooms. He's holding this giant morel mushroom. This is a wild mushroom. And I wrote on her Facebook, I said, he's going to need a bodyguard pretty soon. Because people literally fight tooth and nail in the woods.
Yes.
But there's like these territories people have, and there are secret spots for foraging for wild mushrooms because they're really expensive.
They are expensive. Yeah. And, for that recipe too, I call it a wild mushroom lasagna. It's really kind of based a lot with baby bellas, but there are enough wild mushrooms, I think, to kind of give it that exotic taste, but of course, without spending a ton of money on them, because you're right, they can be pretty pricey.
Right. And you don't want a bodyguard necessarily. And you don't want to be foraging for mushrooms if you don't know what you're doing. No.
Well, that's true.
Not the safest
And Serena's not too far from me. So if she's getting wild mushrooms, I might need to call her up and see if I can have a few.
Oh, I think you need a little road trip there and to get in on her secret stash. I love it. So when I was looking through the book, because, I go through these food jags, right? So I find a book I love. Mm-hmm. I cook from it like crazy. And so that's kind of like I'm in that mode right now with your book. And so when I saw the pasta fagioli.
Pasta
fagioli. I have to tell people it's spelled pasta, then there's an E, and then there's Fagioli. So if you
it looks like fagioli.
Right, pasta e fagioli. And it just made me crack up because there was this episode, I want to say it was on Jimmy Kimmel, and it was this whole goof on gyro or gyro, the sort of the Italian lamb kebabs. Do you say gyro? Do you say gyro? Some people don't say anything because they say, I'm going to mispronounce it. That's how I feel about pasta fagioli. That is my pasta fagioli. But now I know how to say it. And I actually, this morning, before you came on the show, I texted my college roommate and I said, how do you pronounce it? Because when we were in college, we used to do these road trips to her family's home in Connecticut. And her mom, she grew up in an Italian kitchen like you did, Alex. And her mom always made this pasta fagioli because it's so good when you're cooking for a crowd. And I had these amazing memories eating this dish when I was in college. I have never made it. I don't know why, but now I finally made it because it's in your cookbook, and I'm sharing the recipe, thank you very much, on the blog so everybody else can enjoy it. And it's so delish. It's hearty, it's flavorful, it's easy. I think we should share it now. I'm going to tell you. So just give us the backstory on your version, and then I'll kind of go through and tell everybody what's in it, but kind of your version and what this dish meant to you growing up. Because for me, it's such a vivid college memory. And when I ate it the other day, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just picturing myself in Kristen's kitchen when I was 18. It was just so awesome. So what kind of memories flood back for you?
Isn't that amazing with food? I mean, I think that's such a powerful connection. We think of a dish, all of a sudden that memory comes back in. And for me, this is a dish that actually we ate all the time. I mean, honestly, you talked about how it was great for a crowd. It's also great for economics. I mean, a pound of pasta and some beans is a really great way to get dinner on the table in a pretty inexpensive way often. So we enjoyed this almost weekly. This is my version. It's a little twist off my grandmother's version. So typically it's just pasta. We've always used ditalini pasta, which is a really small kind of tube-based pasta. I do recommend trying to seek that out because I think the texture, the size of the pasta is perfectly like bean size. So it really kind of adds to everything and you're not getting too much of one in a bite. And then, cannellini beans or white northern beans, parsley, and then really it's like a thinned tomato sauce that you're doing. And you can enjoy this one as thick or thin as you'd like it. I usually keep adding pasta water as I go to kind of get the consistency that I enjoy. For this to make it a little bit more health conscious and a little bit more nutrient dense, I do add in spinach at the end. That's not really a traditional way of enjoying it, but to me it felt like just kind of paired naturally with the beans and with the pasta.
And I think too, for anyone listening who's got kids and you might say, oh gee, my kids are picky, I'm not sure they would eat this. The playfulness of the pasta, and like you hit the nail on the head, how it sort of blends in with the beans. It's all the same color, right? And then you've got this sauce, and kids love pasta tomato sauces. So that's the familiar piece. And the spinach, for me, I used, and I'll tell everybody, again, I'll talk you through this in a second, but I used baby spinach. I got in the habit of baby spinach when my kids were younger, just because it's so easy. I just buy the bag of it. And it's playful, and it's tiny, and it's got a lovely little tender texture, and it blends right in. So for this recipe, you're going to need a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil, and then half of a small white onion. Just chop that up, salt and pepper, a teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. I am a big-time baby, and I use that. I use less. 3 garlic cloves, and the garlic really adds a punch to this. 3 to 4 fresh rosemary sprigs. That's that like telltale memory flavor for me. And then a 28-ounce can, just regular plain tomato sauce. If you have 2 15-ounce cans, use them.
Yeah,
why
that'll
not?
work.
Half a cup of chopped fresh parsley, and then 2 cans, I call them cannellini beans. Am I saying it the way you say it?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yep, or white beans. Yeah, any sort of soft white bean would be great.
I actually think I might have used the Great Northern.
That's usually how you see it. Yeah, exactly, in grocery stores.
And then half a pound of the ditalini pasta, and then 2 cups of spinach. I use the baby spinach. And the recipe's super easy because you just saute the onion, and then you add the garlic. And always, like with any recipe, be careful. Don't burn that garlic. Pay attention. You add the crushed red pepper flakes and some salt and pepper, and you add your tomato sauce, and then you just kind of let it bubble. Oh, you add the parsley. You say to let it simmer for an hour, and I think I took a little shortcut there. I think it's probably okay, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you just bring a pot of salted water to a boil, and you add your ditalini pasta, your cute little pasta. You cook that, and then don't be like in a hurry and drain that pasta water because you want to reserve it. You want to save it because when you assemble the dish, you're going to be combining your cooked pasta with your tomato sauce And of course, you have to add the beans. You can't forget about that. I hope I told people earlier to add the beans because they're kind of bubbling and simmering along in that tomato sauce, right? Is that right? No. This is where we're adding the beans. I'm getting ahead of myself. Before serving, add the cooked pasta to the tomato and bean sauce. Yes, you've got that all together.
Yep.
And then you are going to add some of the reserved pasta water. So, Alex, once you've assembled this and we've got our sauce that's kind of cooked down, you've got the rosemary sprigs in there, so you're going to pull the stems out, obviously.
Yes.
So you don't choke on that. And it's like a bay leaf, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got your sauce, you've got your pasta, you combine the two, the beans are in there, and you're adding pasta water. So tell us a little bit about pasta water and what is so magical and special about it.
Yeah, pasta water is actually my secret for a lot of recipes. And you really want to make sure that you are saving and reserving that pasta water. Because as you cook the pasta, well, first of all, I do usually recommend salting the water before the pasta goes in. So that water is already going to have some flavor to it. But as you cook the pasta, some of the starches are going to seep into the water, and that's what's going to allow any sauce that you make, whether it's here in this kind of tomato broth, whether you're cooking another dish, to really cling to the pasta. It's exactly why you never want to rinse pasta once you've cooked it, once you've drained it, because that's going to remove some of those starches, and it's really going to allow sort of the dish to come together and the dish to marry. In this recipe specifically, we use the pasta water to thin it. Anyone that's made soup with pasta knows that once it kind of sits for a few hours or so, it starts to swell and that broth can go down. So I usually will make a big pot of this, and then, as the days go on, just kind of keep adding a little bit more water to it to thin it out so it's more soup-like. But pasta water is really going to be the key here.
So you're going to add that pasta water, make it kind of soupy, and then you add the spinach, and then it just kind of wilts naturally, right? Because you've added it to the
heat of it all. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, when I served this, I added some grated Parmesan on top. Mm-hmm. Is that cool?
Totally
okay?
Cool.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've done that before. And, I think that this dish really, I love the parsley in it. I just love sort of that nice fresh bite. Sometimes I'll garnish it with a little bit of extra parsley.
Yeah, I love herbs. I always sort of think of herbs as a vegetable. And I always tell people that. And when I do cooking classes with kids, we use mint a lot, like if we're making smoothies. And I'll say kind of rip the mint apart, smell it, taste it, add it. And they really get into it. So herbs can take a dish from kind of ho-hum to really exciting. And the green, even though people might be like, I don't want green in my food, it all kind of just blends in. And I think it's good. So you want to challenge your kids a little bit. And, it's like any recipe. You and I, when we did a little chat yesterday, we were talking about your recipes and how easy they are to kind of change up and adapt if you want to. Like you could leave the spinach out. You could add sauteed zucchini. Like you could really go and you could add a little bit of, if you had a little leftover sausage, let's say. Couldn't you add that, right? If you wanted to go add some meat. I got 2 growing boys. They have huge appetites. And sometimes they'll be like, where's the meat? Or actually what they say to me is after dinner, they say, what are we having for dinner?
Oh, that's so funny.
I'm like, we just had dinner.
I hope that's what comes across in this book too. Yes, these are recipes, but, I think the great thing about Italian cuisine in general is that it's really meant to be, kind of improvised as you go. So if you've got some vegetables lying around that you want to throw in that your kids like, add them in. If you want to add in some chicken or some sausage or, however you feel the dish should be enhanced, go ahead and do that. It's really sort of a primer. And I think that's sort of the nice thing about this type of cuisine. It's really hard to mess up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. What about people who follow a gluten-free diet? Can they still enjoy pasta?
They sure can, and thankfully there's so many wonderful gluten-free options on the market. I know that Trader Joe's has a really great kind of quinoa and brown rice pasta that I'll use, even though we're not gluten-free, but it just sort of has a nice taste, a nice texture to it. And obviously there's plenty of brands out there that do it. But really, besides the fresh pasta recipes and some of the stuffed pastas that are just going to have a harder time finding a gluten-free option for, almost every recipe in this book, if you want to swap in a gluten-free pasta, it should work.
Now, I'm going to put on my nutrition police hat, young lady. Whole wheat pasta. What is your take on whole wheat pasta? Because when I was making this recipe for the pasta fagioli, I thought, oh my gosh, there is so much fiber in there from the beans. I'm using white pasta. I feel cool about that because there's just a ton of fiber. So what's your position as a recipe developer and a dietitian? Where's the balance between whole wheat and regular?
Yeah, well, and you'll notice too, most of the recipes in my book don't specifically call for a whole wheat pasta. And that's kind of on purpose. We never ate whole wheat pasta growing up. It was something that was kind of introduced in high school, but we just really didn't eat a lot of it. And so I kind of take that to mean that, yes, whole wheat pasta is going to have more of the whole grain. So you're going to get more fiber, you're going to get some of those more phytonutrients, et cetera. But for the most part, the benefit of having a whole wheat option over, let's say, a regular pasta or a white flour pasta is really the fiber content. And almost all of my recipes in this book are really supplemented with lots of vegetables, beans, lentils, and you're still getting that fiber intake. It's just not coming from the pasta. And I find that, especially in sort of more of a family-pleasing way or a crowd-pleasing way, there is a texture difference to white pasta compared to whole wheat. And I find that if I'm serving white pasta, as long as I'm balancing that out with lots of vegetables and another sort of fiber-rich food, I'm totally okay having and enjoying my white pasta.
Mm-hmm. Great. And do you make pasta from scratch ever, or do you typically just buy the dried pasta?
I love dried pasta. I can sort of give you a secret too on how to make that delicious. But when it comes to fresh pasta and making your own pasta, I think there's a misconception that it's hard and it's time consuming. It does take a little bit of time. It's something that I would do on a weeknight dinner option. But, if I'm looking for something to sort of, have an enjoyable afternoon in the kitchen, making homemade pasta is a great option. And this is a place that's really great to get kids involved. It's not hard for them to do as long as they can roll out dough. They can be in there with you. They can help to sort of flour the surface, roll out the dough. If they're old enough, they can help to cut the individual noodles out. And I find that's a really kind of fun bonding experience to get everyone in, make pasta, and then, of course, enjoy a nice Italian dinner afterwards.
Great, great. The roasted vegetable ziti, I don't want to forget to talk about that recipe. That recipe, when I made it, it kind of felt very lasagna-esque to me because it was ziti. It wasn't lasagna noodles, so you weren't layering it, but you still had the pasta sauce, the marinara. You had roasted veggies, which I really thought was a great little twist on this recipe because you roasted up carrots and zucchini and broccoli florets, which I view as very family-friendly recipes. And you could cut them up tiny and roast them, and that gets incorporated. I did use whole wheat penne because that's what I had in my pantry, so why not?
And that's okay.
Yeah. And then you called for shredded mozzarella cheese, and you could use part skim certainly to lighten it up, and you called for part skim ricotta cheese.
Yes.
I love this recipe, and it was just so hearty and great for a crowd, great when you have a bunch of kids around your table, super easy. I actually love recipes like that because I'm a leftover fan. And do you have this recipe on your blog, or is it only in your book?
I don't, but if you'd like, we can go ahead and put it up on the show notes or on the website if you'd like to do that. That's no problem.
Great. Maybe what we'll do is we'll put this recipe for ziti in the show notes.
Okay.
And then the pasta fagioli recipe, because I took a bunch of photos of that one. Gorgeous. We'll put that on the blog so people can kind of bounce back and forth. And remember, we're giving away a copy of Alex's book. I think probably U.S. only is usually what your publisher asks for, I think, right, Alex?
Yep. And I'll go ahead and sign that copy as well.
Oh, great. Fantastic. And so we'll have that giveaway going on the blog, and that'll run for 2 weeks. So head on over to Liz's Healthy Table. Alex's website is DelishKnowledge.com. So be sure to check that out. And a couple more questions, and that is, what is your favorite recipe in the book?
So my favorite is in the weeknight section. It's a fresh corn and zucchini gnocchi. And, this recipe actually came about as a recipe, as a vegetable side dish. I was trying to use up, we had a bunch of leftover corn and zucchini in the summer. and, initially just sort of sauteing it down. And then I decided to add gnocchi to it. And I made it, and both my husband and I thought, oh my goodness, this is so good. I need to go back in there and kind of test it and tweak it and include it in the book. And, it's one of those meals that ever since, I think I probably make it weekly in the summertime. It's really simple. I think it's a nice way to kind of showcase that healthy eating and Italian food especially doesn't have to be complicated. There's only a handful of ingredients. It's just corn, zucchini, an onion, gnocchi, and then a few herbs to sort of spice things up. And that's it. And the way that you cook it down, you cook the fresh corn and the butter, it almost makes this really kind of velvety sauce that coats the gnocchi, and it's delicious.
So you could just buy that gnocchi already pre-made.
You absolutely can, yeah. And I actually prefer the vacuum packaged gnocchi rather than the frozen kind for this dish or for most dishes where I'm using prepared gnocchi. I mean, you're welcome to make gnocchi yourself. Again, it's one that's not too difficult to make, but for a weeknight pasta that's as easy as this, just use the dry version.
Can I call it gnocchi, please?
You're welcome to.
All right, I'm going to call it gnocchi. So I'm going to make the gnocchi recipe this summer. I cannot wait. When corn on the cob is in season. Right now in New England, I'm looking out my window, and oh gosh, it is just not wanting to become a beautiful spring just yet. So we're waiting for that. So your book has the quick weeknight meals. You've got healthy indulgences, baked pastas like the Ziti that I made. Mm-hmm. You've got real Italians eat grains. So you've got all these chapters, and you even have, let's see, I'm looking, some homemade pasta dishes too. So lots of choices for people when they peruse the book.
Yes, and a few antipasti and vegetable options to round things out as well.
You have a roasted beet salad in there, which is another great summertime recipe.
Yes.
So I'm going to totally try that one out. On my show, because this is, Liz's Healthy Table, this is episode number 2, folks. So we're at the ground level here. So I'm really excited Alex came on. And one question that I'm always going to ask my guests, and that is, who is your favorite chef or cookbook author or a fellow food lover? Who do you look up to, and tell us why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it honestly sometimes depends on what mood I'm in. But right now I'm really into Ina Garten. She is, of course, from Food Network fame. And I think she just reminds me of my grandmother. And so I just really connect with her whenever I see her doing her thing on TV. But especially her recipes, they are probably not so close to what I do as far as how I normally cook. She tends to have more of a French influence and, pretty more meat heavy recipes. But I love that she sort of has this simple philosophy to her food. She doesn't really try to fuss things up too much. She kind of lets the whole ingredients kind of shine and speak for themselves. And I'm always gravitating towards her recipes and her books. So she's probably my number one for right now.
Good recommendation. Fantastic. I'm not sure that she wants to be compared to a grandmother, but hey, between you and me, we'll just keep that between us.
I think it's just her warm personality. I mean, even her mannerisms. She just really kind of reminds me of mine, not in a general sense.
Okay. Well, first you got the book for the new generation. Now Ina's the grandmother. All right. I got your number.
Yeah. Well, and anyone can be of the new generation. It's just not so much of the traditional based Italian food. This is not maybe what you'd find in every, sort of Italian nona's kitchen. These are sort of my take of what recipes should be in Italian.
Lightened up, plant-based, perfect for the whole family. Works for me. Any other Italian cookbooks people should be adding to their bookshelves besides your book, Fresh Italian Cooking?
Yeah, the first cookbook I ever got was Giada's cookbook, of course. My mom gave that to me when I moved out of college and I was on my own in grad school. And her everyday pasta cookbook, I still think is one of the best Italian cookbooks out there. Again, it's kind of similar to how I cook. She's an Italian girl with sort of some of that California roots influence, which I just spent the last decade in California. So I think we sort of have a similar vibe there. But I just really, again, love her fresh take. Most of the recipes are fairly simple. They're also fairly healthy too, as far as how I view healthy, with sort of this nutrient-dense pasta eating, but it's delicious. But the other cookbook that I often recommend, it's not necessarily Italian based, but it's the Flavor Bible. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of those cookbooks I think I've gifted more than anything. They have a Flavor Bible and a vegetarian Flavor Bible. And it's almost like a dictionary for ingredients. So, if you're not quite sure what to make with zucchini, you can look it up, you can look at tasting notes, and then kind of get an idea of what other foods are going to pair really well with that ingredient. And it's just a kind of a fun way to get in the kitchen and start exploring and start sort of developing what kind of foods, what combinations you like.
Fantastic. I think the key for people is to keep it easy and accessible, flavorful and nutritious. And then you kind of have it all. And then you have a happy family. And that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
And of course, Italian food to me, it just begs for families to come around the table and eat together, which makes everybody healthier and happier. So it's kind of like the winning combo, the great tasting food and the family eating together.
Absolutely. Well, and I even wrote that, in my introduction. I think that these are recipes, and really most things are too, but it's part of being around the table. It's part of coming together, whether that's with family or with friends, but, really sort of making mealtime that special time where you're bonding not over the food, but with each other.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show today. And I hope maybe, you'll write another book and I can get you back on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate it.
So I'm so glad everybody tuned in today. Thanks for joining me and joining Alex. And I just want to give you a few friendly reminders to visit lizshealthytable.com. The show notes will have that baked ziti recipe. The blog will have the pasta fagioli recipe. We have a giveaway going on. So head on over. And while you're there, don't forget to download my free pasta pizza ebook. Since we've been on the pasta conversation, you might want to download that free ebook. Visit me at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And if you want to join my podcast posse on Facebook, you can just shoot me an email, liz@lizshealthytable.com. So that's it for today. Next week, picky eaters. Why are kids picky? And how can you turn the tables on picky eaters and turn them into power eaters? Until next time, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.